A year and a half ago, I embarked on the Zombros European tour. It was a whirlwind adventure across Europe in which we attempted to bring the zombie storyline to life by visiting the real places where zombie maps were set. A lot happened on that trip. There was adventure, there was drama, and we really did find parts of the zombie storyline in our own world. Mistakes, however, were made along the way, and today I'd like to rectify one of those mistakes. I spent the last summer living and working in Berlin, Germany. The last time I was there, I was on tour, and I shot the video, The Real Life Verrückt. While on tour, we had 12 days to make a circle around the entire continent. It was many early mornings and many long drives. We were often on the move and often in a rush. I would try to do as much research beforehand on a location before we got there to ensure that we didn't make any mistakes or miss anything important, but in our haste, mistakes were bound to happen, and I made a glaring omission in my Verrückt video. So today we're going to rectify that omission, and I'm going to take you on a journey back to the Real Life Verrückt. We're going to Wittenau. We'll be jumping on the S1 from Feuerbachstrasse to Gesundbrunnen. We'll be picking up the U8 and then following it all the way to the Karl Bonhoeffer Nervenklinik. When you get off the U-Bahn, you notice immediately the pale orange and burnt red tiles. It's a fitting color palette that really feels Verrückt. Once you leave the station, however, that feeling goes away. Everything's normal. The normalness continues as you enter the campus. It's a sprawling 45-acre plot of land in the north of the city. Don't think this place is some tucked away hidden asylum lost to time. No, it has a modern map detailing the area. There's modern security cameras. In fact, many people from the community use this campus as a park. Local families from the district of Wittenau will take strolls through the woods, and people will sit and enjoy the shade under the trees. Today, it's still an active medical campus. However, parts of it are used as a center for those seeking asylum. As you walk through the woods and follow the road, you'll eventually reach it, the site of the Real Life Verrückt. It's a massive and imposing building. If there was to be a building worthy of the title Real Life Verrückt, this would be it. Between the overgrowth vines that have claimed this building as its own and the pale orange exterior, this building fits the essence of Verrückt. Sadly, there are no zombies. The only thing inhabiting this building right now are bees. In fact, there's so many of them swarming the main entrance that I could hear their cumulative buzz from several feet away. For that reason, I was too scared to peek in through the front entrance. I putzed around the building for a little while trying to get a sense of the inside of the building. I don't think the place is completely abandoned and left to rot. As you look around, you can see there's actually modern additions to the building connecting it to other buildings on the campus. And when you peer in through the windows, it looks nothing like Verrückt. But I kind of expected that. All the walls are painted white, and I even spotted a modern wheelchair elevator. It's a far cry from the blood splatters and insane scribbles on the walls that we would expect from Verrückt. And it goes beyond just appearances as well. This building shares very little history with its in-game counterpart. We know this building to be the Real Life Verrückt because loading up a game of Verrückt tells you that you're at the Wittenau Sanatorium in Berlin. My suspicion is that Treyarch wanted to set the map in Berlin, and the largest sanatorium in Berlin happened to be in Wittenau. So they chose this place to be the setting for Verrückt. And it's not because of its history or connection to conspiracy like other zombies maps are. It's an interesting place when you put it in the context of Call of Duty, but there really isn't that much here. At least, that's what I thought. When I shot my original video in front of the main building, we didn't spend a lot of time exploring the campus. What I didn't realize is that there's a museum just around the corner. And this museum's called Totgeschwiegen, and it's loosely translated to the phrase silent deaths. The exhibit is designed to showcase the history of the clinic, but also bring to light the atrocities and violations of human rights committed within the sanatorium. You see, all the doctor's personal files and administrative files from the period of 1933 to 1945 disappeared without a trace. Years later, in the 80s, the medical crimes of the Nazis became a real public issue, and as a result, a group led research into the history of the Karl Bonhoeffer Nervenklinik. This exhibit showcases the findings of that research. I felt if I was going to do a video on the Real Life Verrückt, it would be a glaring omission not to at least pay a visit to this museum and showcase some of its story. So that's what we'll be doing with this video. When visiting the place, I can understand how I initially missed it. We have, after all, a sprawling campus, and the only real indication that this exhibit exists is this little sign. When I reached the front entrance, there really wasn't much there either, some overgrown bushes and a banner. Inside, it's a relatively plain building with white walls, and I'm inclined to think that the building we call the Real Life Verrückt also looks like this building on the inside. After climbing a set of stairs, I finally reached the floor which contained the exhibit. The first thing you'll note when you enter is the photograph of the campus during its heyday. I'm not sure when this photo was taken, but considering the image is in black and white and the clinic first opened its doors in 1880, I'm assuming it's fairly old. There's also a diorama which displays how the building looked during the time when it was active and not covered in overgrowth like it is today. The first room of the exhibit features a striking image of two children looking out through a window. Unfortunately, I can't speak to the story of these children. It's this room that details the history of the grounds before 1933. Back then, it was a fairly normal institution for the time period. Many of the practices may seem bizarre to our modern sensibilities and current medical knowledge, but understand that this was a different time. Now, this shouldn't excuse everything they did. One of the practices was that sometimes they would have the sick help with agricultural work, which does seem counterproductive to their goal as a clinic. Things, however, were fairly normal. You'll even find photos showcasing life during the time at the asylum, and the grounds even held a school for children with special needs. Moving into the next room is when things start to get a little bit darker. The rest of the exhibit describes the practices of the asylum after 1933 and during the war. Forced sterilization and euthanasia were common practices. If you were carrying what was believed to be a hereditary disease or pose a risk to public health, you could fall subject to these practices pushed onto society by the Nazis. Propaganda was spread all throughout that claimed that these people were burdens to the community and enemies of society. In fact, the final room in the exhibit features a propaganda film on loop the Nazis used to justify the killing of the sick. Children were no exception either. One of the most troubling portions of the exhibit is a wall telling the stories of the children whose lives were cut short and were victimized by the Nazis. Often it would just be decided to euthanize a patient, and then they'd be shipped off by train to what was described as a killing center. Sometimes families of the patients would not even be notified. The asylum also housed many Jewish patients, and these patients sometimes received some of the worst treatment. Most of them were forcibly sterilized and were denied their medical rights. If a Jewish patient didn't die in the asylum, they were usually killed in a way specific to Jewish patients. After the war, these practices were phased out. However, it would get a lot worse before it got better. Following the war, there were massive shortages of food, and infectious diseases ran rampant. Hundreds were getting sick, and dead patients were piling up so fast that they had to be stacked up in carts and buried in mass graves in the surrounding woods. I thought about those mass graves as I was walking through the woods back to the train station to go home. I don't know where those mass graves are. They could be below my feet, or they could be a few miles away. Sometimes history's darkest chapters are hidden in plain sight. Time seems to wash things away. And that's kind of like this exhibit. When I first got here over a year ago, I had read up on the history of the place, and I spoke about it in my video, but a lot of those feelings kind of washed away when I got there. This place now is essentially a public park where families can play and relax. But I'm glad this exhibit exists, and I'm glad I came back and visited. This isn't a fun trip, and it's quite sad. But it's important, and these are stories that I believe should be told. This is what actually happened in the asylums of that era, not what we see in Call of Duty Zombies. Given what went on here, it probably does a disservice to the victims to solely label this place as the Real Life Verrückt, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't go here. If you're a Zombies fan and you are in Berlin, maybe take a trip to see the building that inspired Verrückt. But if you do, make sure you take the time to visit the Totgeschwiegen exhibit and pay your respects. The Verrückt we know in game was home to Group 935, and it was there that they performed their science fiction-inspired zombies experiments. This building, however, while its location may have served as the inspiration for the building we know as Verrückt, it has a much different story. And while it's not as crazy as what we experience in Zombies, I'd argue it's much more tragic.